Hello, I'm John Marshall Roberts, author of The Voice Code, leadership and communication expert. I help people find and fulfill their life's work so that they can thrive in the new economy without a job, doing what they love. And today I'm excited to speak to you about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, a topic that I've struggled over a lot in my life to finally figure out, and that's the topic of career. Let me ask you, do you wake up every morning just rearing with excitement and joy to do the work you do? When you look forward to the future, do you see light and happiness growing with each passing year until you finally dissolve into joy? Or, like most people, when you look to the future, do you get a grim sense of futility, a vague dread? When you get up in the morning, do you have to force yourself to put your pants on and go do what you do and convince yourself that it's tolerable? Let's face it, most people don't really love the work they do, but they do it because they haven't figured out anything better that they can do with their time. This is a big problem. And if you look at the really successful people in the world, like Oprah has said point blank, that finding our life's calling is the most important thing we can possibly do. And you'll hear that from Steve Jobs and from pretty much anyone who's lived a great life. And yet, the majority of heart attacks happen on Monday morning around 9 a.m. Why is this? Because most people have not found their life's purpose, their life's calling. They've not figured out what they're here to do. Now, there's been a lot more lip service about this in the past decade or so than there ever was before, because the conventional reality of the day job, stability, and security has broken down. But still, even though there's been a lot of lip service paid and there's been a lot of books written and TED speeches on the topic, how many of us have truly done the work to find ourselves now actively fulfilling our life's work in our everyday lives? Not many. And if these struggles that I'm talking about feel true and relevant for you, I want to let you know that I have deep compassion, because, as I said before, this has been the biggest struggle of my life that I spent most of my life focused on. When my friends were having families and getting jobs and finishing their doctorates and doing all the things that make people feel secure in the world, I was committed to finding my purpose, and I found myself on a long path of struggle until I finally got some results. To make a short story long, I was raised to believe that you have to get a day job and find security, or else you're going to get eaten by wolves. And I tried my best to fit into that world. First, I was going to be a professor, but I finally got disillusioned with that world of academia when I made some discoveries that led to what I now call the Voice Code, which is my life work. I left academia and entered the corporate world during the dot-com boom, and even though I was getting paid well, I didn't feel like I fit in. I got to work and I made myself do what I had to do, but my heart wasn't in it. Eventually, though, I reached a breaking point. I was in a job where we had a sadistic boss who would torture and torment people psychologically. And I stood up to her one day in a noble moment of truth and told her the impact she was having on others, at which point she broke down into tears and said, "I know you're right," and gave me a big hug, and we were all close and intimate, it seemed. And then promptly the following week, I got a note saying that I was being fired for not doing some minor thing that really had nothing to do with anything. What I realized at that moment had happened is that I had told the truth, and the truth was not acceptable within the confines of the corporate world. And this is the elephant in the room, by the way, for people who are stuck in jobs they don't love, or for that matter, relationships and other situations they don't love. The reason we don't love things is because they are built on lies. And for most people who don't really love their jobs, what they're doing is lying to themselves, forcing themselves to go and do things they really don't want to do, so that hopefully right, they can stay secure and hopefully maybe one day retire and then do what they really love. And that, my friends, does not work. Lying to ourselves never works. But it's a hopeless situation from that point of view, because the fear is that if we leave the comfort of our day jobs, we will get eaten by wolves. That's the big bad wolf story that we were taught from a very young age. Now, for me, when I had this moment, it was in 2006, where I realized that I couldn't both live in the world, the ordinary world of employment, and be honest. I basically gave up, because the one thing I've known from a young age that I needed was the truth. I believe the truth sets you free. It often hurts like hell before it does that, but at the end of the day, the truth sets us free, right? So at that point, though, I realized that I was up a tree. Okay, the truth sets you free and I don't fit in this world. Well, how am I going to pay my rent? And I checked my clever brain for strategies, and what I saw was that if I followed those voices, the traditional voices that had been carrying me from job to job, well, it would just get me in another situation like this. So I reached a crisis where I realized that, frankly, I did not perceive my own best interest. Now, if you're in a position where you're ready for freedom, you're ready to find what you're here for, I'd encourage you to write that down and paste that somewhere on your cubicle or wherever you are, right? So that you see it all the time. I do not perceive my own best interest. Please think of this statement for a minute. And at one level, it's a horrible statement, because if you don't perceive your own best interest, who are you going to believe? Do other people perceive it? The answer is no. They don't perceive it either. So where is your own best interest going to be found? And what I'd encourage you to do is practice sitting with that idea, the discomfort that it brings up, right? The discomfort of knowing that they don't know what's right for you, but neither do you. What happens is there's a lot of emotions that come up, but on the other side of those emotions is freedom, okay? Because your calling, what you're here for, lives on the other side of your fear of security, of not having security. And one thing I'd like to ask you to do as you're thinking through this is flash forward from today to the end of your life. If you were standing in your shoes today, living the life that you're living, and you continued on this path, and for a minute remove the myth that someday by doing the wrong thing, you're going to end up in the right place, okay? But stand in your shoes and project forward to the end of your life and get on your deathbed and look back and ask yourself, am I satisfied? Did I leave it all out there? Is this what I came here to do? And if you do that, sit with that, the end of your life exercise, deathbed exercise, if you will, and look back, it helps you highlight the problem. And the problem is not out there. Frankly, the problem's not even in the job. Right? From a voice code, from the perspective of our research, the world is essentially an outward picture of an inward condition. And so what we're seeing around us, the conditions that aren't satisfying, are actually projections of stuff that's in here. And if you seriously consider that you don't perceive your own best interest, and if you project forward to the end of your life and look back and honestly gauge the level of satisfaction that you'd feel ending your life without really going for it, without really finding what you're here for and giving your gift to the world, what will happen is you'll feel pretty crappy for a little while, but it will stir up that wall of angst, if you will, the discomfort. And if you can sit with that without judging it, without running from it, without drinking to medicate it, without rationalizing that someday in the future, right, then I'll be free. If you can just sit with that emotion and let it be, just accept it as it is and listen to it, eventually what's going to happen is it'll be like a wall opens within you. You'll go through perhaps even the 5 stages of grieving that people go through. What are they? Anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But those walls are walls within you that you're going to drill through by opening to that discomfort. And at the bottom of that, you'll find yourself anchored in a new awareness. You will unclog the receptive centers of your will, which lives around your gut, and you will receive the light of a new understanding about what you're here for, what you're here to do. Now, this is a process that for most of human history, or I guess all of it until recently, has been very subjective, unsystematic, and frankly, very frustratingly long for people to go through. For example, with me, this career vocational search, until I got clarity and working through these emotions, was already well underway when I reached that breaking point. And I had suffered many discouragements and many fears, and sadness and grief and anger and rage and all this stuff. And there were a lot of bruises from that process until I finally got clarity. But here's what happened for me. Okay? In that moment when the dam broke and I gave up trying, I surrendered to the futility of solving my own problem, I had a memory occur for me. A memory of a more powerful self, you might say. A self that lived at the end of time and at the beginning of time and all through it, that I hadn't been listening to in my frantic search for security. And that self told me, basically, don't do anything but what I tell you. And so I listened to it, not because I'm a noble character or even that deep, but because I realized that all the other voices were going to steer me in the wrong path. And it told me to do things. By the way, I now call that my voice. In my book, The Voice Code trains people on how to listen to it without all the suffering. Side note, okay? But at that point, I didn't have a language or understanding. I just understood that I didn't understand, and my will was broken, and I was open to listening. And what it told me to do often was counterintuitive. It told me I had always wanted to work as a speaker and make money speaking in front of stages. That was my childhood dream that I had sacrificed because they told me, and I believed that, I had to finish my PhD or nobody take me seriously. I needed a formally published book, and there was all these rules on it, and I wasn't ready yet, which is another thing to watch out for, the "you're not ready yet" voice, right? But at this point, I was humbled because I knew that I didn't know, and I listened to it. And you know what it told me to do? It told me to go to the gym, right? Go to the gym. And then for a couple months said, don't look for a job, just go to the gym and read this book. It gave me a book called A Course in Miracles, which is a real mind-blowing manual that you might find interesting, pretty heavy. But I sat and I went to the gym every day and I read this book, and eventually it kept telling me, don't look for a job, don't look for a job, join a Toastmasters. Now, I don't know if you know about Toastmasters, but they're like a nonprofit or a small company that helps people practice speaking in public. And I'd already gotten a Toastmasters degree in the 90s. I'm like, I don't want to go backwards. But what do I know? So I did it. Found myself at an IHOP in Santa Monica, right? Going to this thing. Still wondering, where's the money going to come from, right? And speaking. But I started to feel a sense of momentum and clarity. Then it told me, buy a ring for your girlfriend so that you can get married. Well, that was a tough one, but what do I know? So I went and I bought a ring. And then it told me finally, a few months in, it said, now go look for a job. And when I went onto Craigslist at the time, what did I see? 6-figure speaking job, right? I'd never seen one advertised before. So I applied for it. I had a sense of a knowing. I had applied for it and I got it. And that set me on the path to making great money. And within a few years, I had discovered what was going to be the next iteration of the Voice Code. I had launched a book. It had become a bestseller. I was traveling the world, making more money than I ever had in my life, doing what I loved, sharing my light with the world. Okay? So when I finally gave up listening to the world and listening to my inner voice, know-it-all voice, and I just opened my will and surrendered to the futility, I passed through a wall. And I found this thread, I call it Ariadne's thread, that led me out of the maze and into the light of a beautiful career where everything that I wanted was happening. And it was happening often through dynamic, nonlinear, magical, synchronistic logic that was not explainable using the science that I had studied all my life, okay? So that was amazing. And I didn't understand it, but I did follow it because it was giving me what I wanted, Okay. Now, eventually, what's interesting is that that cycle of self-discovery where I'd found my calling led me to a point of success where I needed to get even more clarity on my calling. I found myself in a position where I was doing well in the marketplace, but I wasn't strategically sure which direction to travel. So I drilled down really clearly again on my life's calling in terms of what's the unique gift that I'm here to bring the world in all circumstances, what I call your calling statement. Getting clear on my calling statement led to a huge up-leveling when I discovered the voice code. And what's cool about the voice code map, which is the completion of the research that started way, way back when I was an undergrad in 1994 at the University of Florida. But what's cool about this final map, what's cool for you, is that it actually explained the whole process. It explained the confusion. It explained why nothing had been working before. And what it did was scientifically helped me devise a rigorous process that anyone can use to dramatically collapse that learning curve and minimize the suffering required to pass through that wall of fear and indecision and step into your power and into your gift. Listen, finding your life's work is perhaps the hardest thing you can do, but it's also the most important thing that you can possibly do. So it's well worth the effort. Now, in this video, which has already run a little long, I'm not going to get into all the details. Let me give you just a simple process that will kind of sum it up and get you thinking on it, right? And if you want to go deeper, you can always check out my books. My first book, Igniting Inspiration, shows how to communicate your crazy vision to others who don't get you, all right? But the most recent book, The Voice Code, shows you how to align with that higher self or your voice and the 6 skills that will help you do it. In the meantime, here's what I'd say to you first, okay? First, please, 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 do not ignore the symptoms of being out of alignment with your calling. Do not minimize the importance of finding your calling. Honor the itch, okay? Please honor that inner itch and don't hide from it. It is your friend and it is leading you to freedom. Okay? There's a lot of negative consequences that come when we try to deny that itch. So please honor that itch. Know that you do have a calling. And it's not intellectual. And you'll know that you found it when you know that you found it, when you have no doubts whatsoever. Also know that this calling is not able to be trapped into a specific form. It's not a what. Your why is not a what or a how. It's a why. It's inside, and it's alignment with this timeless, all-powerful aspect of self. And when you align with it, you know it. And once you align with it, it compels you to give yourself to the world in a way that only you can. Okay, so your calling is not a job. Your calling is you, to give yourself to the world. And you can do that in all situations, whether it's at a job or whether it's at a Starbucks. The essence of who you are exists always in all situations. And so please commit to finding your calling, but don't go looking in the wrong places. Don't go looking in a job for it. Stay in your job. Accept your situation, which leads to the third thing I'd recommend. Please accept the present moment as it is. Even though there's challenges that you have maybe in your current job or your relationships or whatever's holding you back, you can't change it by trying to change it. This is a paradox. You have to accept it as it is, and then it unravels of itself as you accept things you open to receive from that higher self. Man, do I wish that I'd gotten that earlier. I can't tell you how much struggle I created by trying to fight that. Fight against this skill, this mastery skill of acceptance. A skill which is essential for the third point I want to make, which is I want you to commit to finding that calling, and then as a process, what you want to commit to is the path of discernment. In my last video, I talked about the dark side of discipline. Discipline being when we force ourselves to do things and we get into a struggle. I'd like to ask you, as part of your path to find your life's work, and you might enjoy reviewing that video if you didn't watch it. As part of your path to finding your life's work, I want to ask you to commit to discerning correctly the inner guides that you're following on a day-to-day basis. Consider writing, "I do not perceive my best interest," up somewhere so that you see it every day and remember it. Because even though that's not always fun, it brings up these fears of not being safe. Understand it is those very fears that are holding you back. Listen, the infinite you has no problems. None whatsoever. And it is just waiting to share with you the awesomeness and the effortless invincibility that you hold within as you stand in your gift and offer it and allow reality to shape itself to lead you into a life of accelerating, increasing abundance, joy and prosperity, a sense of connectedness with all around you, a playful, mischievous knowing that you're ready to die, that you are ready to die because you've left it all on the table because you're here right now, giving all of who you are to every moment. That is your calling, and that calling is accessible, but only if you're willing to relax, accept the darkness, and allow it to begin to speak to you and dissolve so that you can receive the truth of who you are. And you can do this in your current job. You can practice acceptance and discernment within the constraints of your current situation. And that's very important to know, because one of the things the shadow has us do is it has us not look because of the fear of not having a job. Well, keep going to your job. What we want to do now is get out of the either or frame, practice raising your frequency, right? Raising your happiness, raising your courage, raising your clarity and your commitment to yourself and to the world, a commitment that spans now until the end of your life. We want to practice increasing that on a daily basis and enjoy the practice and let that lift you out of your circumstances when the time is right. So I think that's about enough for today. As you can tell, I'm very excited about this topic because having suffered a lot in this area myself, I'm now living in a new world. And let me tell you, it's a world that's well worth fighting for. Looking at history books, it's taken most people about 20 years of suffering to get to the point that I'm pointing you towards. Now, if you stick with me, we can get you there much quicker, in under a year. I'm not kidding, right? Science is good when it's used for things that matter. And there is now a systemic process we can do that, right? But it's not going to be easy. But how easy is it what you're doing now, living in denial? How easy is that? How easy is it looking to the future and not feeling totally inspired? How easy is it being around people who don't accept you because you don't accept yourself? That's a lot harder. So let's take it one step at a time and be happy, and let's get you there quickly because the world is waiting. The world is waiting for your gift. I'm waiting for your gift, right? The world will work when we each find our life's work and commit to it fully with a happy heart, and we find something that we're so in love with that we'd be willing to die for it if we had to. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "If a man does not have something he's willing to die for, he's not quite prepared to live." Well, I want you to find the truth before you die, and I want you to find it soon so that we can all benefit from the beauty that you're here to bring. The power that you're here to bring. What are you here to bring? I want to help you find it. Okay? So please, let's get started by at least committing to the truth that you have a unique calling, and it's not a concept. It's your essence, and it lives right here and now beneath whatever suffering and denial you've been hiding from. And if you have the courage to step into that and walk through that wall with me, alone or with whoever, on the other side, you're going to find the life you've always wanted. And when you get there, it won't really matter to you what your circumstances are, because the abundance that you feel will be immediate and sustainable, and it will be a continuous outflow to the world instead of a life spent trying to get from the world what you need in order to compensate for that chronic sense of lack, stress, overwhelm, and or boredom. So thank you very much for listening. If you like this crazy stuff I'm talking about, please sign up and subscribe to this channel. This is just my second coaching video ever. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to keep getting better and better, and I look forward to your comments, your feedback of any kind. We're in this together, and I couldn't be more grateful. Thank you.